Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about managing injuries during meet prep in your powerlifting. A lot of the times, people will be pushing into a meet prep. That meet's coming up. You're 3 months out, 2 months out. It's kind of in the swing of things, kind of pushing those heavier loads, and then sometimes some pain starts creeping up. Right, things start happening. Your shoulder starts hurting, knees start aching, and I just know I get a lot. I've gotten a lot of questions from people, asking, I'm 3 months out from my meet. My back hurts, my knee hurts. Like, what do I do? Can I still do the meet? Like, how can I get to the meet? So I feel like this is a topic I haven't really seen people touch on a lot as far as rehab goes. So I thought, I'd get into that today. Okay. Yeah, man. So like the very first thing I guess I tell people to think about is this meet even worth doing? Like, is it even worth doing this meet? Like for instance, is it a local meet? Is it nationals? Is it like a regional meet? Like what is the importance in the grand scheme of things of this meet to you, right? Because we can potentially try to train around the injury to get to the meet, but is the potential risk of making the injury worse and sending yourself back further worth getting to the meet and trying to even pull this off, right? So like let's say you're a national competitor, you're hoping to compete at nationals, and you've already qualified for nationals, and you have a meet coming up between now and nationals, and you have to decide, am I going to go ahead and try to train around these injuries and do this meet, and is it really worth it when I've already qualified for nationals, when I could just kind of take a step back, rehab, and make sure I'm good for nationals when it comes. And so those are kind of things you have to like think about, when this happens. But let's say, it's nationals, right? Like it's nationals, or it's a meet that you really, really know you want to do, and to you, it's worth it, right? From there, there's a couple things we can try to try to make sure that we can actually get to the meet and be able to perform at the highest potential at the meet. So one of the first things you want to think about really is how intense is the pain, and really are you, like, how can you train around it, right? Like for instance, if it's like an acute injury, right? Like something that you pulled your adductor, you pulled your adductor and it's like 10 out of 10 pain, and you're like 2 weeks out. In that situation, you're probably not gonna be able to do the meet. Like it's possible, but an acute, intense injury like that close to a meet, you're probably gonna have to pull out of the meet. It's possible, but I wouldn't say it's very, very likely. And then the next thing, like with that pain level, like are you able to do significant loads, right? Like are you able to load weight that would actually be significant for you when you're training? But like the basic strategy, kind of the first thing I tell people to do is to stop thinking about RPE and think about something I'm more call RPT, right? And RPT stands for rate of perceived tolerance. And so the idea there is that, because we typically say if with injuries and with pain that you want to keep pain below a 3 out of 10, right? But the problem with that is that that's an arbitrary number, right? 3 out of 10 pain for one person might be different than a 3 out of 10 pain for somebody else. So what I always tell people is, we say 3 out of 10 pain, but it's really just, is it tolerable, right? And person to person, you kind of know, like when you're pushing into pain, okay, this is more than what I should be doing, versus like I tell people is like tolerable is more like it's uncomfortable, but it's not like making you wince. It's not significantly changing how you move, things like that. So that's kind of what we call RPT, or rate of perceived tolerance. And from there, we want to make sure that like we're keeping things at like that 3 level, right? 3 is like for like a 3 out of 10 rate of perceived tolerance would just be, like I said, like it's manageable, it's tolerable, it's uncomfortable, but it's not, affecting movements or making you wince and things like that. And that's where we want to keep our threshold at. We don't want to go above that when we're training, whether with this are like our top sets, back down sets, or any loads that we're using. And in that, right? So within that, we want to also think about, how much load can we actually manage within that, right? So if, for instance, comp squat, like let's say you have like knee pain, back pain, whatever it is, right? You're typically getting to top sets. Let's say you typically for a top set of 3 or a top set, your weight would be around 500 pounds, right? Well, from there, you want to say, okay, well, what can I manage while keeping it at a 3 out of 10 RPT, right? So let's say I can only do 350, right? Or let's say I can do up to like 480, some significant loads with like I'm still keeping it manageable. Then we want to maybe try to do that so we can keep that comp specificity, right? But if we're at a point to where the only way we can get to that RPT is with like significantly reduced loads, right? Let's say like typically you do 500 and 300 is the most you can do while keeping it at that RPT. Well, that's a point where I might say you want to consider using a variation, right? And a variation can be a couple different things, right? And I talk a lot about variations, whether it's like reducing range of motion, doing a completely different lift. There's a couple different ways you can go about it. Like an example would be, for instance, somebody who has low back pain, right? And on their squats, and no matter what they do with their comp squats, it just keeps getting flared up. But they notice that if I try a safety squat with a safety squat bar or SSB squat, I can load a lot more than what I could low bar or high bar, and I can push more to those normal ranges than what I could do. Well, in that instance, despite the idea of comp specificity, it might be better off for you to just use that SSB squat as your primary lift and as your for your volume rather than trying to force a comp squat, just so that you can maintain like a decent stimulus and also just keep getting that training volume in. Another idea would be bench press with shoulder pain, where trying to go full range of motion is just too painful with significant loads. Whereas if you used like a spoto press or a block press, you can actually start pushing into those heavier loads while keeping it pain-free or relatively pain-free and still being able to push that. And so, yeah, so like, yeah, and the idea is that, we can keep that stimulus high. Let's say, well, with block press, we can hit like our 90% range, right? Well, then that's going to probably do a lot for us as far as keeping the stimulus high and being able to get that volume in. And so, like, in regard to this, though, there's a couple of different ways that we can, look at it or ways we can approach it, right? So let's say, for instance, you get to your top set, and for your lifts, you can do your top set, work up to it, warm up to it, hit your top set, and it's relatively pain free, or it's within the RPT. But afterwards, all your back down sets are just extremely painful, or just pushing, or just too painful to do, right? Well, in a case like that, I might have somebody do their top set, with their normal range of motion, that normal primary lift or competition lift, but then we'll use a variation for their back downs. A great example of the way I've used this for people in meet prep and outside of meet prep is, let's say for bench, for instance, right? We build it to a top set on bench, and then for all their back down sets, we're going to do a block press or a spoto press. Because it's still similar to the competition movement, we're just doing less range of motion. And for them, that's tolerable, and then we can still get in a decent amount of volume and a decent amount of intensity. Or, if just even working up to the top set is too painful, then in that instance, we can just do a block press or variation for all the volume. And with all of this, the idea is that, you're better off doing what you can manage without making the pain worse versus trying to force the competition movements and force these loads that you can't tolerate. And then you end up getting worse, or, you show up on meet day and your pain levels are at such a high point that you can't even hit the numbers you want on meet day. Versus with this approach, you might not be hitting loads that you think are heavy enough, but you're going to have yourself in a position to where when meet day comes around, your body might be in a position now with pain levels to actually be able to push those heavier loads and hit those numbers that you're wanting to hit, or at least hit the most you could potentially hit given the circumstances.
All right, so here's an example of how I would actually approach this with an actual client that I had. I worked with Kyle De Leon back in 2022. So about 3 months out from 2022 USAPL Mega Nationals, Kyle reached out to me. He had a history of about 9 months of shoulder pain with his bench press. That it started after he increased his bench frequency to 4 times a week. Um, and due to this, for a lot of that time, a lot of those 9 months, he was unable to like push heavy weights due to that pain in his shoulder. And the pain was most prominent whenever he got to that touching point. So like the touch point, the pause point on the bench. And so with him, we started off with block press in that first block we worked together. So you'll see the first block, we were doing sets of 4 on his primary day and then sixes on his secondary day. And so, he started off with, so even just adding that, block, I think we started with a 1 inch block. He was able to finish out that first 4 weeks with a 402 by 4, like with no pain. Week one, it was 330 by 4 with 1 out of 10 pain. And then 402 by 4 with pretty much no pain on that top set on week 4. And you'll see on the back offs, he was still having, a little bit of like pain, like 1 to 2 out of 10 pain, just, minor pain there. Um, but in my mind, like, that was still, we were moving in the right direction. We were seeing progress. And, he was doing so well that we pretty much, in the next block, we jumped straight into doing full range of motion comp bench on his main day. And then on the secondary day, we started off still with just, doing spoto press, so not pushing full range of motion. And on that first day, going full range of motion again, he did 352 by 3. It was 3 out of 10 pain, so still tolerable. And then we ended off by the end of this second block, he hit a top set of 376. Um, hit a top set of 376 by 3 with pretty much no pain, and then back downs there's still a tiny bit of pain, but then he was also able to end up hitting or doing full range of motion for his comp movements. For a secondary day, he was able to do full range of motion comp movement on a secondary day as well. And then from there, so pretty much after that second block, I think he was about a month out from nationals, and from that point, Kyle's coach took back over and was doing his programming again. And so pretty much, Kyle went on. He hit 195 kg bench at that nationals, which was I think it was 2.5 kgs under his comp best. Um, and so this is just an example of where just doing something as simple, like, in my last video, I did the block press. The last video I did the block press for bench press as well, kind of shoulder rehab. But it's something where as simple as this, 3 months out from nationals, we're just doing like one block. There's one 4 week block of reduced range of motion with the spoto press and the block press, and on working our way down, was able to get into the position where he was able to start pushing the comp bench again and able to go into the meet and actually perform at a high level at the meet. Didn't hit a PR, but even getting close to, like, your personal best after all that time of sporadic training is great. And this is only with him benching 2 times a week, whereas before, he was benching 3 times a week, and then he added in that fourth day and ended up getting injured. So with just 2 days a week um, of benching in that first block, not even competition bench pressing, he was still able to go on at his meet and perform this well. So this just kind of goes to show that you shouldn't be afraid of using a variation, using a reduced range of motion, or just decreasing loads a little bit to allow yourself or your athlete to show up the best they can on meet day. It's much better, in my opinion, to take this approach versus just forcing those competition movements that are painful and just making the pain worse. Whereas, potentially Kyle could have ended up not being able to do nats at all, or having to take like a token bench for his attempts just because pain levels were too high. But yeah, that's it. Peace.